In this lecture, we're going to be talking about the consumer and the community. I've already covered some of this information in the video lectures that have done, that I did for this section. But I'm going to kind of go over some of that again and talk about some other things in this particular lecture. First of all, we've already talked about advocacy and empowerment, or if not, here it is again. And these are some statistics. There are about 50 million people in the U.S. who have disabilities, physical, mental, intellectual disabilities. About 78% of the non-disabled population are employed, compared to about 35% of people with disabilities, and the majority of those 35% are not employed in competitive employment settings. So you can see that people with disabilities are typically underemployed. We have an economic argument for rehabilitation services, being that consumers receive help that allows them to re-enter or enter the competitive job market. We've talked about the concept of equity and equality and social justice, so that everybody in society has the opportunity to achieve their fullest amount and to fully participate in society. The economic argument also talks about earnings and paying taxes rather than being a recipient of tax dollars. From an economic perspective, it can be argued that lack of government financial support for rehabilitation programs makes little sense, so that one of the arguments for rehabilitation is that, and government participation in rehabilitation, is that it leads to economic self-sufficiency. We then have the moral argument for rehabilitation services, social responsibility, the concept that everyone has the right to quality of life, so that rehabilitation programs are considered a humane necessity instead of a luxury or privilege. We have human rights, community activities, education, employment, and recreation being part of that, and obviously to make these accessible to persons with disabilities, rehabilitation services are necessary. The concept of a balanced approach, we don't want to lead to having competition for resources or euthanasia, for example, and we need to look at a blend of the economic and moral themes in order to look at the best way to provide and expand rehabilitation services. So for some audiences, if you look at the funders of rehabilitation, they are going to focus more on the economic argument. And of course, you can understand that that's based on taxpayer dollars, and so you'd have an economic argument. People with disabilities, the independent living movement people, for example, might focus more on the moral argument, the quality of life argument. And so a blended approach attempts to combine both of those, the economic and a moral argument. Rehabilitation centers, community rehabilitation programs provide a wide array of services. They help to organize vocational rehabilitation services, and school-to-work transition services are often go hand in hand with community rehabilitation programs. Now, community rehabilitation programs provide a variety of different services. This can include vocational evaluation, getting a GED training, some sort of vocational training. Can also provide work adjustment and personal adjustment types of services. Can provide transitional services, and can provide assistance with job placement. And so vocational evaluation can be done on the basis of a traditional way of matching, of developing modules that simulate jobs that exist in the community, and then test people to see how well they match with those simulated jobs. That's been the traditional way of doing work adjustment, of doing vocational evaluation. We also use paper and pencil tests, which can include aptitude, interest, academic tests to look at a person's abilities to function in different jobs and to benefit from educational experiences. We also do interest testing to determine what the interests are of the individual, so that we can help the person be able to match, as we've already talked about, match between the job and the person's interests and abilities. A rehabilitation facility can also provide experiences for helping the person with regard to adjustment to work adjustment services, and also can provide short-term training services. And when I look at work, what we're looking at would be helping the person in terms of adaptation to the workplace. And that what we do when we do work adjustment training, and traditionally work adjustment training has been provided in rehabilitation facilities. However, a more recent trend in the past 10 or 12 years has been to provide community-based rehabilitation services. But the basic purpose, whether it's in-house facility training or external training on the job or in a job setting, may not be the actual job the person gets, but what we want to do is to, through work adjustment training, increase the skills the person has for employment, decrease deficiencies that interfere with work, and increase tolerance for varied work behaviors. So what we want to do is to be able to help the person through work adjustment function and fit into the workplace. And we need to look at the job, we need to look at the person, we need to look at how the person responds to doing that job, and then we need to look at the response of others to how that person is doing. And looking at that model, that stimulus and person, the response, and response to how the person does, to me is an important component of understanding adjustment to work. Now, when I look at a work setting, what I look at would be the actual physical setting of the work. And that physical setting is, where is it done? Is it done in an office? Is it done outside? Is it done in a factory? That would be the physical setting of the workplace. Workplaces also have what's known as a cultural setting. How are things done? How do people relate? What's the expectation for the dress code, for example, formal or informal dress code? Of course, today it's going to be more informal than formal, but some places have certain expectations, and people do things in different ways. And even if you go to different state rehabilitation agencies, they're going to function differently depending upon perhaps where they are located in terms of the hierarchy of state government. Are they in education? Are they in workforce development? Are they someplace else? That can all have an effect on the culture. And flowing from culture would be of a workplace would be the social situation, the nature of the individuals who are in that environment. Whereas culture can relate to how things are done, appearance, dress, attendance. The social situation relates to interpersonal issues, how people get along with each other, how they function with each other. And then, of course, we have the task, the work situation, and what are the requirements of the work situation. And then finally, we have the person or the self. And all of these combine make up work. We have the physical situation, the cultural situation, the social situation, the work task itself, and then we have the person being interjected into that work task. And, you probably all know this intuitively, but, when people have difficulties on the job, it often isn't because the person can't do the work task. It has to do with the other factors, with the factors, the cultural, social factors, with just personality factors within the individual. And so when we do work adjustment training, what we're looking at very frequently is helping people be able to not just do the work task. And of course, in work adjustment training, we're often not focusing on the task the person will actually be doing, but we're focusing on helping the person with maintaining appropriate attendance, with maintaining attention to the work task, with maintaining, not just doing the work task, but attending to it, not taking breaks without getting approval and so forth. Being able to function with co-workers, being able to get along with supervisors, knowing how to deal with conflict. All of those things go into what we do in work adjustment training. And as I said, for the most part, the issues when people get in trouble or get difficulty at work, it's not because they can't do the job, it's because of those other factors, the attendance factor, the ability to get along with others, the ability to focus on the job. And rehabilitation facilities are very good at doing that sort of thing in terms of helping people. Now, rehabilitation facilities have come under criticism because of their factory nature or look in many cases, and also because they were criticized for, quote, warehousing people. In other words, keeping people in the facility beyond the time that would be reasonable for that individual, which again kind of goes against some of the ethical things we talked about if indeed that is the case. And so what rehabilitation facilities have done is to focus more on community-based training, shorter-term assessments and evaluations, shorter-term retraining, and helping people get back into the community. They've also focused more on moving away from kind of the factory sort of environment and doing work adjustment in non-traditional types of facilities or arrangements. There is a tremendous need for rehabilitation facilities to do a variety of things, in my judgment, whether those would be things such as helping people with evaluation, whether it's matching people with different jobs, or whether it's helping people with regard to being able to identify jobs that they would be good at doing, recommendations for retraining, and so forth. And I think those would be some of the things that we would be focusing in on. Let me just focus a little bit about the meaning of work and what work means before I move on too far. Work means identification. Work helps not just provide economic self-sufficiency, but it also helps with self-esteem and helps with people being able to function out in the world. And so work in that sense is very critical, very important. School-to-work transition helps in youth develop skills needed to make the transition from public school to work. It improves the quality of life of individuals with disability, which in turn empowers individuals to seek more opportunities, and is basically an outcome-oriented process to help transition from school to work or school to post-secondary education. Supported employment focuses in on job preparation and assistance for people with severe disabilities. It would take place in a competitive sort of environment. You would look at services including job site training, advocacy, long-term job retention, follow-up services. Independent living enables individuals with disabilities to exercise freedom and choice over their lives, and it addresses self-esteem issues, emotional well-being, functional abilities, interpersonal skills, personal behaviors, and environmental barriers. Centers for Independent Living, non-residential, community-based, nonprofit programs that are operated by consumers with disabilities. Residential programs, on the other hand, can be transitional independent living centers that can provide long-term residential care and group home environments. And that is the end of this presentation. Here are some references that go along with this.